we don't understand exactly how God does that, how God works on our behalf, or why he does it in the certain ways that he does it, but we know that he does, because in Romans 8:28 it says that we know that God causes all things to work together for the good of those who love God and are called according to his purpose. And so that we can know, right? Like I said at the very beginning of this, there's a lot of things we don't know about God, a lot of how he works that we can't understand. But we can know that. We can know that he does work on our behalf and that he always works for our good and for his glory. We know that to be true. And so sometimes that good is blessings and mercy. And then sometimes that good is, consequences, serving consequences of our actions. That's good for us to get a just punishment, right? Sometimes that is good for us. Sometimes he is getting justice for someone else, and that is good for his kingdom and for his people who he's getting justice for. And so, it may not always look good to us, but it always is for our good and for the good of his people. And so Psalm 87, actually 57, because I can't see well, Psalm 57:2 says, I will cry to God Most High, to God who accomplishes all things for me. So God accomplishes everything that he accomplishes for us is done by God. Scratch that. And then in Psalm 84:11-12, it says, for the Lord God is sun and shield. The Lord gives grace and he gives glory. He withholds no good thing from those who walk with integrity. Lord of armies, blessed is the person who trusts in you. So God doesn't withhold good things from us, right? But again, we just don't always see things in the same way as God sees them. And so sometimes it may not feel good to us, but God knows that it is good for us. He knows what he's doing, and nothing that God ever does is bad or wrong. He can't do bad or wrong things. Deuteronomy 32:4 says that he is the rock. His work is perfect. All his ways are just. He is a God of faithfulness without injustice. Righteous and just is he. So God is perfect. He is righteous. He is fair. Everything he does is good and right and fair. That's what this says. And so, even though we can't understand how God works, we know he does work for us. We know that everything that he does is good. Everything that he does is right. Everything that he does is fair. The Bible tells us that. So, again, we may not understand exactly how God works, but we know that he doesn't do anything bad or wrong. That everything he does is good, right, true, and just. And then Job 34:10-12 says, far be it from God to do evil, and from the Almighty to do wrong. He repays a person for his work, and he lets things happen in correspondence to a man's behavior. God certainly will not act wickedly, and the Almighty will not pervert justice. So he lets things happen according to our behavior sometimes, but he never does anything wrong or wicked or bad. He also never causes us to do wrong. He may allow us to do wrong. He may let us do something wrong and then allow us to serve the consequences of that. It says he lets things correspond to our behavior. Maybe he allows us to do that, and then he lets us suffer the consequences of that and then uses them for his glory and our good. Maybe that is the case. But he never causes us to do wrong. And that's what he did with Absalom. He didn't cause Absalom to do the wrong things, but he let him do the wrong things without intervening. And so Joseph says this to his brothers all the way back in Genesis 50, verse 20, whenever Joseph's brothers are worried now that his dad has died, that Joseph is going to take revenge on them for selling him to the Egyptians. And he says, no, you meant that for evil, but God meant it for good, to bring about the present result, to keep many people alive. And so he says, God didn't make his brothers sin and sell him, but God used their sin to save not only, Joseph, not only Joseph's family, but all of the Jews and the surrounding area. And so he says, he took your sin, even though you meant it for evil, God took it and he used it for good. And then in Psalm 81, 11 to 12, it says, but my people did not listen to my voice, and Israel did not obey me. And so I gave them over to the stubbornness of their heart to work by their own plans, to walk by their own plans. So he's saying, sometimes I give you over to your sin. Sometimes I just don't protect you from that. And I let you do what you do, and then you serve the consequences of your actions. On the other hand, sometimes God does save us from our sins. Sometimes he does intervene and keep us from sinning. He protects us from ourselves sometimes and from the ways of this world, and prevents us from following through with our sinful plans. And so in Psalm 19:13, we see this in several verses, all when people are praying that God would protect them from their own sins, their own sinful nature. And so presumably if we can ask for God to protect us from that sin, then he does do that sometime. And so in Psalm 19:13 it says, keep your servant back from presumptuous sins. Let them not rule over me. And then I will be innocent and I will be blameless of great wrongdoing. So keep me from premeditated sin so that I will be innocent and I won't do things wrong against you. So if we can ask that God would keep us from premeditated sin, then the assumption is that he does that sometimes. Matthew 6:13, Jesus tells the people how to pray, and part of that prayer, he says to ask God not to lead us into temptation, but to deliver us from the evil one. So, God can deliver us from those temptations, keep us from sinning. And then in Psalm 141, 3 and 4, this might be the most comprehensive. It says, set a guard, Lord, over my mouth, and keep watch over the door of my lips. Do not incline my heart to any evil thing, to practice deeds of wickedness with people who do wrong, and may I not taste their delicacies. So place a guard over my mouth means shut it. Don't allow me to say anything that would be sinful. And then don't incline my heart to evil things. So change my heart. Keep me from even wanting to sin. Keep me from that temptation. And then don't let me practice the wickedness that other people practice. Don't even let me, dabble in the things that other people are doing and want to do them. So keep my mouth, keep my heart, keep my hands, and keep my feet, all from sin. And so only God knows why sometimes he chooses to allow us to sin and suffer the consequences of that. Sometimes why he allows us to sin and then grant us mercy from the consequences of that. And why sometimes he just doesn't allow us to sin at all. Sometimes he just intervenes and he's like, nope, I'm shutting your mouth. Nope, I'm blocking that path. I am not going to allow you to do this. We don't know why God chooses to do that sometimes in a certain way and why he does it in a different way. Often God is working behind the scenes and we don't even know he's doing anything. So it's not just that he's, purposefully not intervening or that he is intervening and we watch it. We have no idea that it's even happening. Sometimes that is the way. And the only way we even know that he did it sometimes is upon reflection years later. And we're like, oh, God was taking care of me this whole time and I had no idea. Or he was going before me and he was working all things together for me and I didn't even see it. And so God works on our behalf all the time. And sometimes we know it and sometimes we don't. And when we do know it, sometimes we don't understand it. And God is the only one that can understand those things. And so I'm going to read you several verses that just tell us how God does that. God is working behind the scenes or right in front of our faces sometimes, even though we don't quite understand what he's doing. And so Job 23:13-14 says, God is unique, and who can make him turn? Whatever his soul desires, that is what he does. For he carries out what is destined for me, and many such destinies are with him. And then in Psalm 33:6-15, it says, by the word of the Lord the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their lights. He gathers the waters of the sea together as a heap, and he puts the depths in storehouses. Let all the earth fear the Lord. Let all the inhabitants of the earth stand in awe of him. It just shows how he's in charge of the whole universe, right? And then in verse 9 it says, he spoke and it was done. He commanded and it stood firm. And then the Lord nullifies the plans of nations. He frustrates the plans of people. The plans of the Lord are what will stand forever, the plans of his heart from generation to generation. So he nullifies the plans of nations, of a whole entire nation. He's just like, nope, you're not doing that. And he frustrates their plans. He allows them not to happen. He makes their plans chaos. And then he says, my plan's what's going to happen. I am going to make sure that what I want to happen happens and what you want to happen doesn't happen. And so it says, blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord, and the people that God has chosen for his own inheritance. The Lord looks from heaven and he sees all of mankind. And from his dwelling place, he looks on all of the inhabitants of the earth, and he fashions the hearts of them all. He who understands all of their works. How God does that, I've got no idea, right? Again, we know that God is doing these things and we can't quite understand how he frustrates our plans and how he nullifies the plans of nations and how he says, no, my word is going to be done. But we know that he does it. And when he does it, we know that it's good and right and true. Psalm 139:5-6 says, you have encircled me behind and in front, and you've placed your hand on me. Such knowledge is too wonderful for me. It's too high. I can't comprehend it. So he's like, you hedge me in behind and before, and you protect me all the ways around. And how you do that, I've got no idea. That's too high for me to understand. And then in verse 16, he says, your eyes have seen my formless substance, and in your book were written all the days that were ordained for me, when as yet there were none of them. So he's saying, you've ordained all my days before they even happened. How that happens, I don't know, right? But God is in charge. And so sometimes he allows us to do what we want to do. Sometimes he intervenes. And all of that is under his control. Just as a parent, sometimes allows their kids to do things and lets them serve the consequences of it. And sometimes they see what they're doing and they intervene and make them stop. And that's what God does. God sees all of what we're doing, and sometimes he intervenes and sometimes he doesn't. Sometimes he prepares the way before us and, helps us to walk in a smooth path. And sometimes he, doesn't do that. Sometimes he allows us to just walk the normal path of earth. And so, again, we don't know why he does all of that the way that he does it, and we don't know how he does it, but we know that he does. Proverbs 16:33, the lot is cast into the lap, but its every decision is from the Lord. So God, nothing's by chance. The lot is cast, but God makes the decision. Proverbs 21:1, the king's heart is like channels of water in the hand of the Lord. He turns it wherever he pleases. He turns people's hearts. directs their hearts, directs their feelings, and their ways. Isaiah 14:24, the Lord of armies has sworn, saying, certainly, just as I have intended, so it has happened, and just as I have planned, it will stand. God's ways are the ways that will prevail. Isaiah 25:1, Lord, you are my God. I will exalt you. I will give thanks to your name. For you have worked wonders, plans formed long ago with perfect faithfulness. And then the last one, Isaiah 55:8-11 says, for my thoughts are not your thoughts, and my ways are not your ways, declares the Lord. For as the heavens are higher than the earth, so are my ways higher than your ways, and my thoughts than your thoughts. For as the rain and the snow come down from heaven, and do not return there without watering the earth and making it produce and sprout, and provide seed to the sower and bread to the eater, so will my words be, which go out from my mouth. It will not return to me empty, without accomplishing what I desire, and without succeeding in the purpose that I sent them for. So whatever God speaks, it will be accomplished. He will make sure that his purposes are accomplished whenever he makes a decision. And so ask God to intervene on your behalf, to provide for you and protect you and the people that you love. And then trust that he is working in the best way for you. And even if you don't understand it, and know that he's working even when you don't see it. And thank him for that. Thank him for the work that he's doing on your behalf, even when you don't know what it is. And trust him that he is a loving father watching over his child, taking care of you, and making this life work in the best way possible for you, even if it doesn't feel like it, even if you don't understand it, even if you don't see it. Okay. Like I said, we can't understand everything that God is doing. We don't know how he's working for us, what that actually practically looks like. But we can know that he is working for his children, that he loves us, that he's taking care of us, and that everything that he does is good and right and fair, and nothing is wrong that God does. Absolutely nothing. And so, I just think that the most important thing is that, maybe we don't completely understand God, but we don't want to misunderstand him. We don't want to have misperceptions of God. And so hopefully at least I have cleared that up with God's word today of any misperceptions that we might have of God whenever we're looking at a certain circumstance and saying, God, what are you doing? What's happening here? Why aren't you doing something? Why are you doing this the way that you're doing it? And then that is all we can know. We just have to stand on what we know, and that has to be enough for us. We have to know that God's doing what is good and right for us and for all of his people. And sometimes God has an entire earth to take care of people. And so just as sometimes I can't give both of my kids their way, sometimes to grant justice to this person over here, you have to get punishment. Sometimes to give what is best for this person over here, you might have to endure a little bit of difficulty in order to allow you to serve the consequences of your actions. It might hurt someone else. Those kinds of things happen, and we can't work the whole puzzle together, but we can rest assured knowing that God can. God can work the whole puzzle together. He can be a perfect parent to every single one of his children. And so we just have to trust that he is doing that, even though it doesn't always make sense to us.